Self-directed learning is easier than it's ever been. The average toddler has access to more knowledge than all the kings of the old world combined. So our limiting factor then becomes our time, because we have access to all of this knowledge. So now we need to become effective, i.e. making the right decisions. But where do you start? I mean, if you've got a simple problem, then obviously Google is a fine solution. But what if your problem isn't that simple? What if the questions that you're asking are a little bit more complex? And what if your problem is so complex that you don't even know where to start asking questions? That's when it's important to really start looking at the different options that we have. This is part 2 of a 3-part video discussing quadrant 3 of the knowledge quadrants. If you haven't watched the last one, it handles some terminology around the different knowledge types. It's quite important to understand that for this, so I'll add a link here for your convenience. And then this also has a sister video which will look at how to be an efficient learner and some of the academic models associated with it. That should be up in a week or 2 or 5. But tonight we're going to focus on how to be an effective learner, making the right decisions. First up, Google and ChatGPT, or whatever system you may choose to use. Obviously they focus primarily on explicit knowledge, and it's only what's on the internet. But still an incredibly valuable research tool. I use these all the time. I function as a C-level exec. I meet clients from various different industries, and I need to have detailed conversations with them about their growth strategies, digitalization strategies, human performance strategies, etc. So I hit up ChatGPT. I write a prompt telling it who my client is, what industry they're in, what I want to look for, what I'm interested in, what kind of statistics I need. And it obviously scours the web, finds me some interesting stuff, and I specifically ask it to cite as well, so that I can click through and go make sure I'm not citing statistics from a terrible source. The retention metric on something like this is impossible to find, but no doubt it's probably sub 1%. That's why it's very important to put it all into a spreadsheet or a presentation and layer your own knowledge on top of it. So interpret it, push it up, elaborate it, and then have better conversations. Classroom training. The retention rate on classroom training is piss poor, 5 to 20%. And this will obviously vary based on how much effort the lecturer or teacher puts into the course. So standing in front and reading from a book or presenting a few slides with no visual aids will probably get you closer to 5%. And then doing something like class discussions, deeper homework, or something as simple as visual stimulation will get you closer to the 20%. Now, my personal problem with this is I believe that it's usually easier to represent easier concepts. So you might find that your teacher is making the piece of the knowledge that's really easy to understand much more appealing, and as a result that goes into your thick head, but the harder stuff remains just touched upon in a sort of closer to 5% retention rate way. And I do believe our minds work like this. If something is nice and shiny and pretty, we remember that, and the other part we don't. In fact, I remember in high school I had a mathematics teacher who was incredibly visually stimulating, and as a result my focus on the work and the numbers faltered quite badly, and I had to work quite hard to get that back up. But jokes aside, I do think this is a problem that we have in society, because it takes an exceptional teacher or lecturer to make difficult concepts easy to understand, and then to present it in a way that you can actually grasp people's attention. Now, obviously, I'm not trying to say school is stupid. The socio-cultural benefits of school are incredibly important. All of the periphery that you learn is incredibly valuable, but as a tool for getting knowledge into your head, it's not very optimized. Books. Now, your retention metric on books is quite dismal, 10%, but I believe the true value in books lies in the ability to transmit tacit knowledge. Of course, you can also get deep procedural knowledge in books, but the books that I tend to read are more about tacit knowledge. I love to read books about people who found companies, or invest, and what kind of strategies they follow, what they've learned through life, etc. One of my all-time favorite books is a book called Tools of Titans, Tim Ferriss. If you haven't read it, I absolutely recommend it. It is a gateway book. I largely consume my books in audiobook format. I personally believe it's the best way to do it because A, it's easy to fit into your day. When you're walking to work, when you're taking the bus, when you're taking a walk after dinner, when you're cleaning your house, that is a perfect time to read. And especially because your retention on a book being 10%, it means if you really want to absorb that knowledge, you're probably going to come back to it. So what I do is I listen to it at a very high speed, usually 2.5 or 3 times speed. It's enough to keep my mind engaged, but at the same time, I can still focus on something else. This is important because System 1 and System 2 in your brain, if you're not familiar with the concept, we'll cover it in the next video. But basically, you want your brain to be in a relaxed state and not too focused and not too anxious to absorb that kind of knowledge. Social learning is incredible for human interaction. Now, obviously, I can't put a retention metric on it. It'll depend on who you surround yourself with and what kind of topics you discuss. But there's a lot to be said for the beauty of the human connection. And there is that notion that we are the average of the people we surround ourselves with. So pay attention to who you surround yourself with. Choose people who are subject matter experts in something that you're interested in, whether it be mathematics, whether it be art, whether it be music, whether it be photography, whether it be cars. And choose people with characteristics that you admire: authenticity, honesty, strong moral values, because these will invariably rub off on you. This is the beauty of friendship, being able to absorb all of these amazing things from the people that you spent all of this time and effort building relationships with. And I think it's quite critically important when someone speaks about something that's outside of your comfort zone, recognize that as a moment where they are, and try to at least find someone who knows what they're speaking about, recognize that they know more about this topic than you. And don't steer the conversation back to Eurovision or last night's football, but instead appreciate that moment of learning. If your friend's speaking about calculus, and even if you don't really have a particular interest in it, all knowledge is immensely valuable. So try and understand as much as you can. Try to get into it and even say to them, I really appreciate how much you know about this. I struggle with the concept. I would like to know more about it. Can you structure it in a way that can really help me? And I promise you, no one's going to say to you, oh no, that's silly, let's speak about the football. They're going to say, oh, wow, cool. And they're going to go home and they're going to feel good about themselves, which is an amazing thing to do for another human being. And then the other beautiful thing you can do for your friends is be an arsehole to them. There's that lovely old saying that a wise man gets more use from his enemies than a fool does from his friends. So if you want to be a good friend, be the enemy for a little bit. Ask your friends to test your ideas and test their ideas in return, because this is the safest space you'll ever have to do that. And that's such a beautiful part of being a human, pushing each other, challenging each other, looking at things critically. And once you get to a point where that's how your social circle interacts, I mean, I'm not saying 100% of the time, obviously, but once you get to that point, it's really hard to go back to saying, how's this weather we're having? How was the football last night? So, friends are good. Next up, e-learning. Now, e-learning is one of my favorite things in the world. I worked in e-learning for 5 or 6 years. Didn't think I'd love it as much as I did. And the reality is, e-learning is one of the best ways for you to transfer knowledge. The retention metrics are very wide because it's a very wide industry. But on the high side, you can get as high as a 90% retention rate. That would typically be virtual reality training or something built into a game. But on the lower side, just to sort of cover the span, if you work for a big corporate entity, you might be familiar with these typical almost PowerPoint style click-through trainings. Let's say you work for a bank and they've got anti-money laundering training. You get a little notification saying you need to do this training. You log onto a portal and it's a wall of text and a stock photo and a wall of text and a stock photo and a wall of text and a stock photo. And then you get an assessment and it's very easy to complete and you're done, because everyone has to do it, everyone has to pass, so it gets dumbed down. But then on the more interesting side, and one of my key favorite things in the world, is structured courses via video delivery on a MOOC. So let's say Udemy or Coursera. And I literally have more than 100 courses on Udemy. You can watch it at an increased speed and it's always accessible. It's incredible and it's so cheap. The courses I bought the other day was on a Black Friday offer. It was, I think, €7 a course. And some of them are like 35 hours long. 35 hours of knowledge from some leaders in some industry for €7. It's unfathomable. Imagine the world we could build if we could rebuild the entire school curriculum as e-learning, get it internationally accredited, and then, in theory, some poor kid sitting in sub-Saharan Africa could have the same education, maybe not led by teacher, but knowledge-wise, as a kid sitting in the USA, where there's a lot more money invested in this kind of thing. Can you imagine what the world could look like in 30 years if we could do that now? And then, of course, finally, we have unstructured and informal e-learning. This is my terminology, and I think you can tell I'm getting passionate about this. This is your online forums, or more particularly what I absolutely love is YouTube. There's so many people out there who still think YouTube is for watching videos of cats falling over. There is so much beautiful knowledge on YouTube. Hey, I just realized I'm on YouTube now. But that's where you, let's say, have a problem and you don't need to do a whole course, you just need to remember a piece. So let's say I'm doing a financial report and I'm in Google Sheets and I forgot how to do live currency conversion. So you just go, how live, you don't even need to type the whole sentence, how live currency Google Sheets, click on video, and you find a video of some 12-year-old explaining it absolutely flawlessly to you, and you can implement it and you're done. And this is how so much of my skill set is built. Like, honestly, if YouTube wasn't around, I would probably still be pathetic at everything I do. So yes, I absolutely love e-learning, and I should probably move on now. The final one is on-the-job training. It is still the highest metric that you can get, 90%. And this is your apprenticeships, having a mentor, actually learning by doing, touching the actual machines, doing the actual work, phoning the actual client, completing the actual report. Now, the problem with this is, of course, immensely expensive for the company. Not only in terms of paying you while you train, but paying the other person who's losing time to train you, paying money for courses to be assembled if they had to assemble courses, and of course that risk, because while you're new and while you're learning, the chances of you potentially making a screw up that could cost the company significant amounts of money needs to be factored in. So if you ever find yourself being underappreciated at work and feeling like your company doesn't care, just remember how much money they've invested in training you. That's essentially it. So now that you have all of this, it's important to actually pay attention to what kind of knowledge you need. So if you need tacit knowledge, hit up a book, because you're not going to get that level of tacit knowledge on Google. You're not going to find it. Tacit knowledge you won't find on the job training, or in e-learning and such, you would get it as an aside. Someone might be presenting a topic and then sort of have a side conversation. And that's fantastic. And if you want procedural knowledge, the best way is to essentially be an apprentice, right? I've always wanted to be able to paint, basic traditional painting. I can do digital painting, but I've never in my life touched a paintbrush or anything like that. And I'm at that point in my life now where I feel like I'm really missing out. I'm seriously considering just finding an art lecturer who would be willing to teach me after hours. They organize all the supplies and I would pay for it. And I know I'll be crap at it, but I want to understand it because I think it'll make some of my other skills better. So that's the value of it. And read books. Honestly, if you are out there and you are like me and you never got into books, just dive on in. Honestly, it is the most incredible world. Start with Tim Ferriss's Tools of Titans. If you want to read philosophy and psychology, anything, Nietzsche, Jung, man, get into yogic philosophy, there's such beautiful text and so much wisdom in it. If you're into the history of mankind, cosmos, what was the first one from the author of Homo Deus? I think it was just called Sapiens. Also a fantastic book. And Homo Deus with it. If you want to get into sci-fi, oh, there's so much good stuff. Honestly, I can't. Everywhere I go, I've got my headphones on me. If I've got 5 free minutes, I'm on Audible listening to an audiobook. Learning, man. It's everything.